problem. Okay. The Energy Master Plan that we put out in 2008 had goals for solar production through the year 2020. When we calculated it out based on the rebates we had in effect at that time, we realized that it was going to cost ratepayers about $11 billion in incentives to subsidize the solar goal for the year 2020. We realized that was not a sustainable plan, so we had to come up with a better system. We had to replace the capacity-based rebate with a production-based incentive, hence the SREC, which is also a market-based system, and I think Alex will get into that later. SRECs are currently payable for the first 15 years of life of the system, and under new legislation that was just signed about 3 weeks ago, the life is extended from 3 years to 5 years. So you can hold on to your SREC and save it. You can trade in the year that it's generated for 4 years thereafter. So that again helps out people in terms of managing their SREC trades. And we go on. This is just a little graphic that shows how the systems are financed in New Jersey. You've got the cost of the system, but that's offset by the black arrows, the investment tax credit, SRECs, and of course the value of the energy itself, the energy that's produced, as well as net metered. We have one of the more aggressive net metering regulations in the country. It used to be capped at 2 megawatts. That cap has now been removed, so we have net meter projects in the 6, 7, 8 megawatt range. And that's really it. So thank you. That was maybe a bit more than a brief introduction, but thanks for your time.
Richard and Alex should probably sit up on the outside, so Richard, why don't you go down and Alex sit down. You guys go up and take your seats. Right on the end here.
Your mother knew to put your feet on. I know. She probably will.
Yeah, let's get the names right too. You want water also? Okay, so let's start off by kicking the hornet's nest right away. If New York were to have an incentive program, should it be an SREC-based program or a feed-in tariff? Why don't we start off with Ron?
Well, I actually have, is this on? Doesn't matter. I actually have a note here from Mike Winka, who is head of our Office of Clean Energy. Just in case I forgot to mention it, he says, Ron, please stress and state specifically that New Jersey does not believe in feed-in tariffs for solar. If someone asks you what you think of FIT, tell them it's a great school on 7th Avenue. That solar will be promoted and advanced through a competitive market-based structure similar to the way all energy and energy facilities are procured. The solar incentive can be decreased to 0 as the market puts solar and other generation on parity. In the SREC market, this is easier to do than in an FIT structure. So that is the word from up on top. We do not believe in feed-in tariffs.
Richard, you've been through some financings. Any thoughts?
I don't need to go any further than that. But we do look at the stability of revenue on a monthly basis, and we have found that SRECs have given us the greater, if you will, capability as long as we have established the floor of production. So when we look at SRECs, we look not only at the stability over the long term of financing, but also we create a floor to make sure that the off-taker understands that there is minimum commitment that we look for in revenue. And I did have a slide on what we're currently doing, for example, in New Mexico. And New Mexico put together a pilot project for themselves last year at 60 megs. We grabbed 5.4 of that in a financing situation, of which it's really made up of 2 different combinations. SRECs being a greatest portion of that at 20 cents per, or $200, if you will, on a meg basis. And the feed-in, of which we have contracted with the local utility for the same duration of time, which happens to be 10 years, at a nickel. So we were establishing a floor for the production of 5.4 megs, and also a floor of revenue, which we turned around and financed along with. That happened to be under 1603, and project 1 was completed at 2.9 megs, and 2.4 is now under, but it's been safe harbor. So we look at stability over time.
So I think we saw some of the pros to the to a feed-in tariff from Mike's presentation a little bit earlier. Sean and Liz, I'd like you to speak a little bit about the realistic probability that we get the New York State Legislature to act on a feed-in tariff at this stage of the legislature's understanding of what that means.
Sure. Well, I think I'm going to back into that a little bit better, more differently. And I think what needs to be done is thinking about what you want to solve. What problem are you trying to address? And is it an SREC or is it a feed-in tariff? Is it a reverse auction mechanism? They're all different. They all serve different purposes. So I think we need to state the goal. And if the goal is deployment of solar resources cost effectively and serving different markets, then a feed-in tariff is certainly a part of that component. And I don't want to be, they've left the room, so it's not just kissing their butts right now. But the New York Sun program is a start to addressing that. And so you've got the feed-in tariff in Long Island, which is certainly going to address a certain part of the problem, which is wholesale generation at large scale. You have net metering, which I hear could be increased soon for the whole state. You have some deployment resources in excess of $400 million. I mean, $500 million of solar has been invested right now, and we're wondering, like, why doesn't New York have a program? Only in America would you be given $500 million and be complaining about it not being enough, I think. This is like the definition of success. I think you just have to back into what you're trying to solve. And just a broader point on a regional, look at it regionally. New Jersey and Massachusetts are, of my portfolio of 4 states, but the 4 most serious solar markets in the region. New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and Massachusetts. Massachusetts and New Jersey enacted their programs before the financial collapse. Connecticut and New York are working on that post-financial collapse. And they're structured completely differently as a result. I mean, they're a result of their condition. Connecticut kind of took the first step and said, all right, solar industry, here's a pot of money. Have at it. You keep telling us you're going to reduce costs, do it. You're going to have $8 million this year. You'll have $8 million next year. You'll have $8 million after that. Install more solar. Like, install it and then install more. $8 million is not a heck of a lot of money, but Connecticut's not a huge state. New York's almost exactly the same thing. I mean, obviously the parameters are different. It's a different state. There's the upstate and downstate and Long Island. They all look different, but essentially the same thing. Here's $108 million. Have at it. Next year we'll give you another $108 million. Have at it again, and we hope that you come back the next year with more installed solar for less. And I think that is sort of how things are shifting. I don't think I.
No, I think that was great. Liz, did you want to talk a little bit about the plausibility of feed-in tariff in New York?
Yes, I do, and I think Sean's observation is actually a very acute one because our Public Service Commission and NYSERDA and certainly our administration are very sensitive to the market. New York has a successful wholesale market. I think the decision makers, policy makers are very familiar with how the market works and what's going on with wholesale electricity prices. It's very transparent and visible. So we are in a post-boom world, and I think if we see a feed-in tariff or if we see an SREC in New York, it's going to be somehow tied to the wholesale market. protect the ratepayer as much as possible, you know, from potentially overpaying for the credits or for the energy. Having the wholesale market helps you on the energy side because you can just, you know, attach a program to that. And for instance, NYSERDA would likely, I mean, they're not, I don't know if they're here, but if we, oh, hello. You know, one can envisage a feed-in tariff or an SREC program where the value of that externality, whether you call it an SREC or a REC or whatever you want to call it, would fluctuate, but you would have a fixed rate on the wholesale rate would stay where it is, and the SREC value would fluctuate to make sure that the developer got, you know, whatever value he bid at in the first place. So I think NYSERDA could probably do something like that. I know